First of all, thank you, Dr. Shonali Pachauri, for joining us today. I'm very excited about this conversation. And I also want to welcome everyone here and watching us online to the Pop Climate Leadership Conversations, a tribute to our chief mentor. This project aims to strengthen youth leadership and explore tactics that empower the youth to tackle the most pressing environmental issues faced today. We are conducting a series of conversations on leadership strategies, recommendations, reflections, and examples, each focused on a global leadership and a different pressing environmental issue. This initiative is designed and implemented as a tribute to our chief mentor, late Dr. R.K. Pachauri. And today we have a very special speaker with us today. I will go ahead and introduce her before we go into the questions that each youth leader will be asking. Dr. Shonali Pachauri is a research group leader of the Transformative Institutional and Social Solutions Research Group in the Energy, Climate and Environment Program at the International Institute for Applied System Analysis in Austria. Prior to this, she served as acting director of the Former Transitions to New Technologies program and as a senior research scholar in the Former Energy program at the IIASA. She has also served as adjunct professor at the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. Dr. Pachauri's research focuses on the role of social, institutional, and technological innovations for inclusive human development, particularly for those without access to basic infrastructures and services. Her work experience pathways for achieving universal access to decent living energy services for human well-being and assessing the wider impacts of this on sustainable development. She has a lead. She was a lead author for the IPCC working on Group 3 Sixth Assessment Report and was coordinating lead author of the Global Energy Assessment. She serves on the Science Advisory for the Panel for Climate Change and the Clean Air Coalition and on the advisory group for the International Network of Gender and Energy. She is also in the editorial advisory boards for the journals of Environmental Research Letters, Current Research in Global Environmental Sustainability, Economics of Energy and Environmental Policy, and many more. Also, I would like to point out that she was recently recognized as one of the best social sciences and humanities scientists in Austria. So it's truly an honor to have her here with us today. And I would like to ask Dr. Ash to please help us ask the first question to Dr. Shonali Pachauri.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd be very happy to ask her the first question. And thank you once again to Dr. Pachauri for the conversation and Anna for this initiative. We'd love to hear your thoughts, Dr. Pachauri, on what leadership means to you.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you to all of you for inviting me to be part of this. I'm really honored. Yeah, I mean, of course, leadership means many things to many people, I suppose. I think leadership is the ability to really inspire, but also to empower people to do more and be more than they think they can be. And also, to basically be able to learn more and through that learning do more than they think they can do. I also think that to be a leader, you need to have a lot of integrity and also a strong intellect. You need to be somebody who has a lot of empathy. And someone who's a very good communicator. And when I mean what I mean by communicator is not just the ability to speak and explain things, but also the ability to listen. Because I think a very important part of communication is listening, and people don't realize that. And so I think really to be a good leader, you have to be able to listen, because you have to continuously be able to learn from others and then use that learning to inspire and to delegate effectively. I think these are things that are very important in leadership.
That's amazing to hear, your comments about, especially about the importance of listening. This such a large part of communication is listening, but also being able to help people achieve all that they can based on their potential and the important qualities that you talked about. And this is an important insight, especially as this series of conversations is about leadership. And you rightly point out that it's different things in different contexts. But I think hearing your thoughts on what leadership means to you and how we can apply leadership in the context, certainly of, I know you speak from your own perspective, but I think it has a lot of relevance for young people as we are working with young people to build their leadership to then help many more people become young leaders and leaders who go on to protect our planet and all its wonder and the many species, not just um, human species, but that they need to understand that we are dependent upon all species to ultimately survive ourselves. So thank you very much for that important perspective. And I let Anna take forward the rest of the conversation, but it's an important thought to keep in our minds and in our hearts as we continue with the rest of this conversation too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pachauri and Dr. Pachauri. I really like both of your inputs. I completely agree that communication is also listening, and I think sometimes that part is not spoken about as much. So I'm glad you mentioned it, and you brought these insights to us. Now I would like to hand it over to Drisha, who will be asking the next question.
Thank you, Anna. First of all, welcome, Dr. Pachauri, and congratulations for the amazing award that you have recently received. So taking forward the question that Dr. Raj mentioned and going into your field, can you tell us how are new innovations in energy and technology helping solve both social and environmental issues?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Drisha. Thanks for the good wishes as well. It's lovely to be part of this conversation and to see all of you here in the conversation. So, when we talk about innovation in the work that we're doing, people often think about innovation as just technological innovation and, the hardware of innovation, sort of the physical technology side of innovation. And of course, that's very important. But we think of innovation as much broader, because innovation is not just technology, hardware innovation, but it's also the soft side of things. So it's institutional innovation, it's social innovation, it's it's innovation in the ability to govern effectively. So it's all of these things that we talk about when we talk about innovation. And I think of course when you often talk about solving the big challenges that we are faced with today and sort of thinking about innovations to deal with social and environmental issues, then again it's it's very easy to say, okay, the technology hardware will solve it all. And what we find from our work is, of course, the big technological hardware solutions are very important and very, very essential. But at the same time, you need to be thinking about innovation in terms of social systems, in terms of personal behaviors, in terms of institutional structures, in terms of governance capabilities. So when we think about innovation, we think about innovation in this very broad sense. And when we think about it, we are of course thinking about all the decarbonization technologies, whether it be through renewables or other ways. But we're also thinking about how can we innovate our social systems, our service provisioning systems, our behaviors and lifestyles that then also can help towards the transformation to a sustainable future, right? So we think very much about aspects of things like, just as one example, the sharing economy. I mean, when we were not as developed as we are today in the Western world, we used to share a lot of the appliances and hardware that we had. Uh, Not everyone needed their individual ownership of things. There was a big sense of sharing things, and in some sense, this is coming full circle now, because even in the Western world, there is understanding that, even for something as simple as a washing machine, there are countries in the world where you have people who live in apartments who share the washing machine. Not everyone needs a washing machine. Nobody's using the washing machine 24/7. It's a waste actually of energy and materials to have a washing machine in every home. And so these are the kinds of innovations that we're also looking at beyond just, the technology, hardware, and appliance and so on. But yeah, I mean, we look at innovation in terms of this entire gamut of things that need to be changing.
Thank you so much for sharing all these small examples. I and fellow, we recently interviewed somebody from New Zealand from an organization called Cyan, and they are working on biofuels. His name was Florin, and he mentioned to us how simple innovation of how they can set up biofuels as renewable source of energy at smaller scales, and it helped them in those areas that were disaster prone, so they have actually been testing that. So that is also innovation, and it was quite amazing to know that as well. And from you, from social and economical aspects as well. So there are so many ways coming up, that where we can talk about energy as well, that there is innovation in delivering it, and at so many scale, and not just the kind of fuel that we are using. So thank you so much. Over to you,
Yeah,
Anna.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, nice example.
Thank you so much, Drisha, for the great question, and Dr. Pachauri for your answer. I like that you mentioned how innovation is not only in technology, but in institutions and everywhere we look around. That sometimes we tend to not think about that type of innovation as much, but it's as important. And now I would like to hand it over to Dr. Norma, who will be asking the third question of the session. Sorry, Doctora, you are on mute.
You need to unmute, Dr. Norma.
That is because I don't say. Sorry. Good morning, Shonali. Good morning, Dr. Pachauri, of course. Uh, nice to meet you now in this scenario. Thank you so much to be with us. And yeah, I have the third question for you in the same line like before, and it's like this. In your work with new technologies and innovations, what do you think is needed for this to be implemented at a larger scale? And secondly, what is the main bottleneck that we are facing today? Thank you.
Thank you, Norma-ji. That is a very big question. And yeah, there is so much one can say about that. But if I have to kind of boil it down to a couple of things that I think are very critical in terms of the bottlenecks, I'll start with the bottlenecks first. So I think the big bottlenecks is capacity and finance. Okay, so we have the technologies, we know what to do, we know how to do it even. But the problem is that in the parts of the world where the most needs to happen, and the most needs to happen very rapidly, the capacity to do that is still not at the level where it needs to be. There needs to be a lot of capacity enhancement, and that's where work like the work that you're doing through POP is very, very essential. You need capacity enhancement everywhere. And then the other problem is finance, because again, where the transformation is needed most urgently, where there is big growth happening in the world, there you have either a lack of finance or the cost of capital is very high in those parts of the world. So one really needs to be thinking about how can you make the capital that's needed available to those countries and those regions. So, I mean, I think those are the big two bottlenecks in terms of why things are not scaling up as fast as they ought to scale up. In terms of what can, again, so if these two things are solved, you can solve a lot of the scaling up issue. But I mean, on the other hand, there are things like, so work that we've done within our own research program very clearly illustrates that the rate of change of technology, so technological innovation and diffusion, if you look at that, the patterns of that over time, and if you look at that for different types of technologies and for different regions, then we find that granular modular technologies that are sort of smaller in terms of their ability to do things scale up much faster than sort of big technologies. And that's again because you need the learning rates are faster with these granular technologies, and that's why they diffuse more quickly. And so even when we're thinking about sort of innovation at a very rural, small scale in regions that don't have maybe the resources that other parts of the world have, there again, we're seeing that, when you think about technologies that are very modular, that you can combine little things separately that are easier to scale, then that works somehow better than very large large centralized technologies. And just as an example, I can give you one example there. So for instance, now if you think about power generation, right? So if you think about nuclear power, this is very capital intensive, large technology. And if you see the innovation rates and the change, the diffusion of technology like nuclear, it's very slow compared to what you're seeing now with solar PV technology, because that's much more granular, right? So that's just one example, but I mean that's something that we are finding that especially when you combine sort of these more granular technologies with some of the other trends we are seeing nowadays with digitalization or artificial intelligence or whatever, then there's huge potential to scale up some of these things.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pachauri. Well, you are right. I think that the technologies are scaling up faster, much faster than we use at home or in our offices or at the universities. But what to do to make people understand that you cannot change because you have a new technology, you keep out the one that you have at home or at the school, or even the labs now. If I have an equipment that is 2 years old, oh, but now we have a new one and we need to change it. That I think that is part of the capacity that you were talking about before, and we need to reinforce that, not only in the society itself, because everybody wants to buy more and more and more the new technologies. But I think that it's very important to work in the academia field also, because the capacity can be started there to spread the message around our families and the communities and so on. Of course, that to work with POP is very important because we can do it from that there space, that scenario, and we can work with a lot of people to make them understand that it's not possible. Even you can improve your own equipment that you have at home. That is much better to say, I will have a new, I don't know, washing machine because it's now electronic. And when something is wrong, you don't have any anymore. a machine, a washing machine that is broken, and you need to buy another one. That is what I think. Thank you so very much for your kind thoughts and very interesting thoughts. I am sure that you will lie it around you and when you have your students also. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Shonali.
Thank you, Nomaji. Yeah, that's why you're absolutely right. Repair, reuse, recycle. That goes without saying. And all the technology innovation you do will not bear fruit if people don't change and people don't innovate along with the technology. Absolutely.
Thank you both so much. That was a great question and a very insightful answer. I would now like to hand it over to Philo Magdalene, who will be helping us ask the fourth question.
Thank you very much, Anna. Dr. Pachauri, this is in relation to the two main bottlenecks that you spoke about. Addressing that, what do you think is needed to achieve universal access to decent living spaces? And why is this very important?
Yeah, thanks, Philo. So, yeah, much of my own work is really focused on providing access to decent living to everyone on this planet. And I don't think I need to convince anyone that a decent life is something that is so fundamental and has to be something that is almost like, a basic right. Every human being has to have a decent life. And you will not get anywhere unless you grant all individuals the right to a decent life. And this is kind of ingrained in our shared responsibility toward other human beings and the planet, and to this generation and future generations, right? So, I mean, that is something fundamental. We have to think about eliminating all forms of deprivation and underconsumption, because otherwise, if people don't have that decent life, then they're not going to be able to solve the big problems that we are challenged with today, because they are just thinking about survival. And this is now even sort of included in the UN 2030 agenda, right? So the Sustainable Development Goals are really also fundamentally about ensuring that everyone is living out of poverty, has decent access to, the material underpinnings of a good life. Yeah, so that's clean water, sanitation, decent energy services, thermal comfort in their home, all of these things. And so a lot of the work that we've been doing is sort of really looking at, firstly, understanding where are the gaps in terms of decent living services, where are the regions where you don't have access to decent living services, and then how can one make sure that everyone gets universal access to decent living services. And basically, of course, what we see is that unlike what you would expect, the amount of energy and materials that you need to provide a decent life for everyone is minuscule. Even if we look at average energy consumption in most countries, it's way below the average. But the problem is that we live in this very unequal world at the moment. And so you have those with excess who overconsume, and then those who have nothing, right? So even if you were to redistribute in some way, form or fashion, if that could ever become acceptable, you don't need more energy and materials to provide a decent life for everyone. You can do it with what we have already. And so you're not worsening emissions, or you're not worsening the footprint on the planet by providing people with a decent life. So that is something essential that has to be done and must be done. And again, it's not something that requires new technologies. We have all the technologies to do that. Yes, it can be done much more efficiently than it has been done in the past. Yes, we can change service provisioning systems so that these are providing better services with lower energy and material inputs. All of that can be done and should be done. But it's really not something that is going to harm the planet, uh, because we know that we can provide decent living services to everyone with very, very low impacts. And in particular, if you were to do some form of redistribution, then you need not increase the energy and material throughput at all. So yeah, I mean, that's something that I think is an easy solution if you just had the government commitment and then, of course, the finance and capacity to implement. And we've seen examples of where this has happened very rapidly, and then other places where it's still not happening, even though we need it to happen. So, with electricity access, for example, which is just so fundamental, we've seen quite a bit of progress in the last decade or two. Yes, of course, there are still issues with the fact that people don't have reliable access to electricity, but connections have been provided to a lot more people than 15 years ago. But clean cooking, which is just as fundamental and has huge health implications, gender impacts, and so on and so forth, we're far, far behind. We're nowhere where we need to be in terms of providing access to clean cooking or sanitation for a lot of people. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pachauri. I completely agree with what you said. Despite all this technological and systemic advancements, we are unable to achieve fundamental rights to everybody. I don't think we've made any progress as human beings. And I agree that it all depends on regulating consumption, redistributing of resources, and so on. It's very much a shared responsibility that all of us are holding. So thank you very much. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Philo, and thank you for the answer as well, Dr. Pachauri. For the last question, I think it's something that will be very, very interesting to hear from you. We would like to know what would be your advice for youth leaders who are interested in learning more about technology and innovation to solve the climate crisis and follow a similar path as you have. What would be your main points for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the youth are already showing us the way. And so they have to continue showing us the way. And, they are the future. So, there is no question about, involving them in all these processes that are happening. I mean, I think the main thing is where and whenever possible, people have to understand the value of education, the value of knowledge. And in some ways, unfortunately, in recent times, because of all the crises that we've been facing, there's been a kind of a loss of faith in science somehow. And this is very sad, because fundamentally, if you don't have that faith in science, then you're undermining your ability to deal with future challenges. And so, for this reason, I think there's a need to also educate everyone, not just youth, but everyone, about understanding what is real knowledge and what is fake knowledge. Because in this day and age of artificial intelligence and social media and all of that, people are bombarded with information. But many times that information is not real, it's false. And that's why, people kind of are having this sense of losing faith in science. And so, I mean, I think there's really, in addition to, of course, teaching people about climate change, about the planet, about, our impact on the planet, and all of these things that I know the pop movement does so well. I think there's also really a need for having some kind of way of educating the public at large, youth and the older generation, about how to distinguish between real and false knowledge, and how to be able to ground truth things that they hear or they learn. Uh, um, but I mean, in terms of sort of innovation, I mean, I think the learnings there, actually, we have so much to learn from people who don't even often have formal education. So, there are so many examples that we're seeing now from global south, from areas that are very rural, very remote, where people are sort of innovating out of need, out of necessity, uh, but are doing so in ways that can have benefits for many other places and many other people. So, it's I think in all senses, it's always a mutual learning story. uh, we have a lot to teach as scientists and as people who do research and who are in the education space. But at the same time, we have to be open to learning from others and from, you know, thinking about, inclusive innovation. I think that's very important, thinking about inclusive innovation. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I completely agree. I think this two-sided intergenerational collaboration is really important, where we have constant learning from the youth are learning from adults and the adults from the youth, so that we can really have the inclusive innovation that you're mentioning. Because I think something that has become clear in the last decades is that if we want to make sure that the innovations stick and that they're implemented correctly and everything, that we are really considering everyone who's involved in the process. So thank you so much for that amazing answer. It's always great to hear all of this advice and all of these ways in which we can collaborate between different people, between different sectors, to really make changes a reality. And with this in mind, I would like to hand it over to Dr. Shonali Pachauri, who will be helping us talk about the conclusion, and Dr. Ash Pachauri as well, who will be helping us wrap up this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pachauri. As you spoke, I learned all the way, and I learned a lot in the span of half an hour. So I really thank you very much for all the learnings that you provided this morning. And I think if we can upscale these learnings somehow, it'll make a world of difference in terms of spread of knowledge and innovation and action. And I was thinking of some conversation that we had recently, and you alluded to that in some ways, that yes, we need to talk to youth, and the youth are very important in this process, but the older people. There are friends of ours who are highly educated and who we found in conversations do not even believe that there's a problem. And it's a shock. It's a shocking situation to find that happening. So I think that's a huge gap. It's a major gap, that people in our own peer groups who are highly educated, well-informed, supposedly, do not believe that there's a problem in this area. It's shocking. So I think that, in a sense, is what you were saying when you talked about adults. And I think the adults have to know and learn, otherwise it's not going to happen. So it's, as you said, a mutual process. It's a mutual learning. And thank you so much, Dr. Pachauri. This has been very helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think what the pop movement is doing, and even this series of talks, is in fact doing exactly that, right? It's having conversations with people and then sharing that learning with a much wider audience. So that's fantastic.
I totally agree, about what you described. And I think the only point I would add as we conclude this very important conversation, or I should say, we start a whole new chapter of a lot of things we need to be doing and doing urgently, is that we know from the science and from our own experience that a lot of the things that scientists have predicted over the several years are in fact happening even faster and at a greater accelerated rate than was originally even anticipated. All of this was predicted though. So I think for us to expect that we can do this by leaving people behind is unreal. And we do need to have adults, and we need to have youth, and we need to have everybody at the forefront of affecting change in their lives, taking the action they can take, and all of us can take action, which will make a difference. But I think the important thing is that we can't do it without everybody, and therefore including adults is important. And I hope even for the youth that are at the forefront, will be involving their teachers and their professors and their parents and their grandparents and their neighbors and everybody. But I think everybody has to recognize we have a responsibility, and that action is urgent, and we all have a role to play in terms of taking that action urgently. So I think you flagged a lot of very important points, not to mention the fact that any innovation, any growth, and any development in the right direction, otherwise it's not development, needs to be inclusive. And we cannot do this while leaving any part of the world behind, or we are not making the progress that we set out to make. So I just want to say there were a lot of very profound learnings for all of us, and we hope to be able to share this very widely. And thank you, and I hope we'll have many more conversations. And hopefully we'll have made progress as we make this conversation. So we'll have lots more learnings too. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I
Thank
let
you. Thank you, Dr. Pachauri.